from, the old patterns of energy in developing countries, and that causes trillions of dollars of cash, and then all the machines in the industries, all the motor cars that are outmoded and so on, they have to be totally refitted and rechanged. But for us to be able to obtain the technology to do this, it has to be at the cheapest possible cost, because each dollar of technology that we have must be able to do 5 times the work because it's 5 times cheaper. And so we come to this issue of intellectual property rights. When intellectual property rights attached to a technology becomes a barrier to its transfer because it increases the cost and it prevents developing countries from making the same technologies, then we have to overcome this barrier in order to have the greater international global good. And this is one of the issues being discussed here. Unfortunately, the developed countries seem to want to maintain their total control over intellectual property, which means technological dominance over such a crucial area as climate change. But the talks are still going on, and we hope that the United States in particular will relax their very rigid stand that we will have business as usual on intellectual property, whilst we ask you not to have business as usual in terms of your pattern of development.
I want to ask a question about, well, for example, very powerful statement of the representative of the Group of 77 in China, Lumumba Stanislas Diaping of Sudan. The representatives here, for example, of Sudan, will be discredited by many right away, saying, who is he to? It's a powerful statement about imperialism, that this is a disgrace, that this secret Danish text is actually dangerous right now, that it's a new Bretton Woods.
I think the outrage really is that we were told all along there's no such text, there's no plan B. We are not having a small group of people cooking up something. So when it is revealed by a newspaper that indeed there is a plan B, and that a few people have been looking at it, then those who are excluded feel very discouraged, because this is the United Nations. It's a very democratic forum. People put forward their proposals. We fight and quarrel, but at the end of the day, we reach an agreement. So I think the feeling is that there should not have been an exclusive group. Right. And if there is a plan to come out with a short version of a declaration, then each region should have been asked to have a representative, and that we trash it out together.
But that issue of the human rights abusers being the spokespeople, like the country of Sudan.
Well, Sudan does not speak for itself in terms of the Group of 77. It is there to represent the entire group. This is an association of developing countries. And what he says is to represent the feelings of the 130 countries of the Group of 77. So he has that mandate to represent the views of these countries. It is not his personal view.
I think it is really important, though, Amy, that you raise it, because we have to understand that this is part of a pattern, that whenever things happen at the UN that the U.S. and other powerful players don't like, the strategy in order to discredit the policies, no matter how many developing countries back it, is to single out a couple of governments with well-earned bad reputations and say, well, we don't need to be, if we think about the Durban II conference, for instance, the Durban Review Conference, what was the line? It was, we don't want to hear about racism from Libya and Sudan, never mind that there were 18 countries that were on the planning committee. So this will be, I think, one of the lines of attack against the fact that the Africa group, as well as the G77, has been very, very strong throughout these negotiations. And we talked about it before, about how the African group negotiating bloc walked out of the negotiations in Barcelona. So when you start to lose political ground, you start to take other lines of attack, and this is certainly going to be one of them. The other one is to claim that there's no big deal about this text. Everyone knew about it. That's also not true. I interviewed Bernadita Smuller, who's from the Philippines and is really the chief negotiator for the G77. She said that this was the first time that she had heard of the text was when she read about it in The Guardian. And she also said that she's been part of these negotiations since 1988 and that she's never seen anything like this. So this is quite unprecedented. And these attempts to downplay it are once again, political lines because they got caught.
President Obama will be getting the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo tomorrow. He will be addressing the escalation of war in Afghanistan, receiving the Peace Prize as he announces the escalation of war. Naomi Klein, your response to this and how the United States fits into this Danish text and President Obama coming here next week, agreeing to come at the end, not at the beginning.
Well, you know, on the one hand, it's encouraging that he's coming at the end. On the other hand, we have to understand how politics works, and I think probably this text, the existence of this text, has something to do with why Obama agreed to come to the end. I mean, most people here have observed that Obama wouldn't come unless there had been some sort of a guarantee of an outcome that would have been acceptable to the United States, and clearly they thought this Danish text was going to be adopted. But you know, if we think about Afghanistan, even coming back to the headlines that you read earlier about Zelaya, you know, 1 year into the Obama administration, I think that we're seeing on so many of the key issues that we really believed there would be change, or where change was promised, that there was a new era of relationships with Latin America, that there was going to be a much less aggressive stand when it comes to the military, the financial sector, and now climate change. We're seeing some a series of very profound betrayals, and this is one piece of it, but a major piece of it.
Martin Kaur, on that same issue.
I think that the U.S. has a positive role to play in the climate negotiations, which it has yet to play, by allowing those countries who are in the Kyoto Protocol, and that's all the developed countries except the U.S., to remain there and to take their commitments there, and to take high commitments there to reduce their emissions by at least 40%. And the United States, even if it does not want to join the protocol for whatever reason, can take a similar commitment inside the convention, because the U.S. is a member of that convention, and do a similar commitment, do a similar cut. Now, the reverse is happening, as we have seen in the Danish text, that those developed countries in the Kyoto Protocol with high commitments are on the verge of jumping ship to join the United States, where the U.S. is not willing to commit to an international treaty at the moment, and is giving a very low commitment figure of reducing its emissions by about 4% between 1990 and 2020, when the science says that we have to do it by at least 25 to 40%, preferably 40%, and Europe is willing to do 30%. So it looks as if the other countries are watching the United States and saying that if the U.S. is going to do so little and is not going to be internationally legally bound, then we are all going to follow the United States in a race, if not to the bottom, to very near the bottom. And this is what is at the heart of the crisis in the negotiation. So if Mr. Obama comes and he can, even if he cannot join the Kyoto Protocol, and we understand why, he could urge the other countries not to jump ship to the U.S., because one day the U.S. is willing to jump up to their standard, and they can just wait for the U.S. for another 5 years.
Obama needs to hear this from the people who voted him in part because they felt that there was going to be a new era on the environment. The Kyoto Protocol is not dying, it's being killed here in Copenhagen, and Obama needs to hear from his constituents that they don't want it to die.
We want to thank you both for being with us. Naomi Klein, author, blogger here for The Nation magazine, and author of The Shock Doctrine and No Logo. Martin Kaur is executive director of the South Center. He's based in Geneva. He's from Malaysia. This is Democracy Now! We're broadcasting live from the Bella Center from COP15, the Climate Change Conference, the only daily global TV, radio news hour that is broadcasting from inside and bringing you voices from the outside.